Finding the right co founder for a small business or startup is crucial. The right founding team is the difference between having a real business that you can build and exit and staying in the idea phase forever or burning yourself out trying to wear all the hats. So today I want to talk about number one, with AI, do you even need a co-founder anymore? And if you do, what types of businesses need a human co-founder? And then what is the right time to bring one on and where do you find them? We have two perspectives in this discussion. I was the original solo founder of a business. I had an idea and I wanted to bring on a business partner. And then Sophia, who is a product enthusiast, wanted to work with a startup at some point, but didn't have a specific idea that she wanted to build a business around. And I'm going to spoil the ending of this one, but we found each other.
And we will tell that story.
Yes, we will tell the story.
I think we should start with the quick hits though. So if someone only has 2 to 5 minutes, we'll lead with the punchline of when do we think you should get a co-founder, what type of business needs one, when do you bring them on, where do you find them, and then we'll get to our story time, how that all played out for the two of us at the end. I guess we'll kick off with what types of businesses do you think need co-founders?
I would say like most businesses need a co-founder, but specifically any kind of entrepreneurial venture or something that you want to take venture scale. These are usually businesses where you're building a product or you're building a business model that hasn't existed before. You're trying out something completely new, and that adds a whole other level of complexity to what you're doing. An entrepreneurial venture is a completely different experience from starting a car wash. Like, they're both businesses, they both can be profitable, but completely different experiences. And I think you could probably find more solo founders running car washes than you can running an entrepreneurial venture scale startup. I think you need a co-founder anytime the solo founder doesn't have the skill set you need to execute on the business. There, I'm sure, are some, what do you call them? Like purple squirrels, unicorns out there that have great technical chops. They're amazing marketers and they can do all of the business strategy ops and visionary work. I'm sure that person exists, but for most of us mere mortals, you only specialize in one of those, if that. So in those cases, you would most definitely want to bring on a co-founder and probably build out a founding team around you.
If we had to simplify it to one question that you should answer that would help you understand whether or not you need a co-founder is, what is the scale that you need to achieve in order for this product to meaningfully solve the problem that you're trying to solve? Because if you are an expert in one thing and you want to go develop a course in digital products around that thing you're an expert in, maybe it's kind of niche, you can probably achieve a lot of the reach and scale that looks like fulfillment for that customer problem set and product without co-founders, because you have the expertise. But again, if you want to do something venture scale, you want to do something that has broad reach across different markets, yeah, you probably want a co-founder. I'm generally of the opinion that most businesses could benefit from a co-founder. It is lonely to start a company, even with a co-founder, but I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be to not have someone who understands the day-to-day difficulties and you can have those conversations with.
And I think the businesses like the ones you were talking about that are more based around a personality, like if you're doing a course or some kind of content creation business or, like something like that, that it is consulting like, I think one of the reasons people find it so difficult to scale those businesses into something bigger than themselves is that it is really hard to bring on a co-founder when the brand is quite literally like your face. It's like, please build this with me. By the way, it's all about me. And I'm thinking about this because like I'm building out a digital course business right now, and that's not something that you and James are involved in because it doesn't make sense. Versus like when we spun up Intrepid, which is more scale than a course, we were all involved in that. Similar to when we founded Dauntless, we were all in the room for that. We all had skin in the game. So yeah, I think that's a good test, looking at what kind of scale you need to achieve to meaningfully solve the problem. And the bigger the scale, the bigger a founding team you're going to need.
Probably. So if someone asks themselves that question and they land on, yes, I probably need a co-founder, When do you think is the right time to bring a co-founder on as the main founder with a business idea herself?
It's better to bring someone on as soon as possible and as early on in the process, because the more perspectives and brains and eyeballs on a problem, the better a solution you're going to get. Especially if you have those complementary skill sets, you're going to see things from different perspectives, and that can really change the DNA and the structure of your business. I don't doubt that if one of us had had more experience, like had maybe run an LLC lifestyle business before, we might have pushed harder to structure that way rather than going full venture scale right out of the gate. TBD if, that works out for us or not. And it's worked out so far, but, we'll see. I have seen a lot of founders who want to refine the idea, the product, the vision before they let anyone else touch it, which I think it probably depends on what you're building, whether that's advisable or not. What do you think?
I think it can depend on what you're building. I agree with bringing them on early. I think the only sign that it might be too early to bring a co-founder on is if you, as the person who wants to found the company, don't have a clear perspective on what complementary skills you need. So the complementary skills that you need if you're going to go do a tech startup are different than the complementary skills that you would need if you're going to go do a brick and mortar business. So I think it doesn't mean, though, that you have to have the business idea completely refined. But I think if you don't even know what market you would want to go tackle, that would make it really hard to assess who would make a good teammate for me to do this. Now, do I think there are teams of founders out there who knew they wanted to work together and knew they wanted to start a company and didn't know what problem they wanted to solve and figured one out? Sure. But I think the more successful players are people who had, as you said, complementary skill sets. So I think at minimum, the founder should be able to clearly articulate what their strengths are and what type of work they would want to be doing and what type of work they would want someone else to lead. And they would be comfortable ceding responsibility of decision making and ceding ground in strategy. Because if there are certain aspects of this that you're like, no, I always want to own the strategy of that, you need to know that before you go and bring a co-founder on, because depending on their skill set, they might want to influence that. So I would say as soon as you can clearly articulate what your own strengths are and what strengths you feel like you don't have that you would want in a co-founder, it's probably the time.
Yeah, I guess a factor in that when you're talking about like seeding responsibilities and strategy is equity as well. So when you bring them on might also in part be dictated how much equity you want to give a co-founder and whether they're going to be like a co-founder from the outset or if you're going to bring them onto your cap table after the business is already formed. We decided our equity split before we formed the business. So we're all in there on the incorporation documents, but that doesn't always happen. So I know there's like a ton of calculators out there to calculate like what equity split should you have, but what is your opinion on how do you negotiate equity? And, do you like the way that we negotiated equity for the company, for our company?
I think the way that we did it made sense. It's how I would advise other people to do it. And I think the kind of tenets under it are 50-50 is a bad idea. You should always have one person have majority control, in my opinion. You need a tiebreaker and responsibility to fall with one individual because there will be differences of opinion in certain things. And so I think there should be one person who has a majority stake. I also think that the type of company and the responsibility of the co-founder should dictate some of the equity. So we've talked about this, but if you're a tech company and you have a multi-member founding team, the technical co-founders in that group need to have a significant stake in the company. It would be very odd to me, and I see these sometimes on the startup job boards. They're trying to recruit a CTO and the equity is like up to 10% is what they'll advertise on the job boards. And I'm like, but the only way that you can make money based on what I'm reading about your company is through your technology. It should be more, that's my opinion. I think like how do you have a CTO feel like they have real ownership over the company if they're a really small share? But that doesn't mean that it has to be 70% owned by the technical co-founder. I think the splits they don't have to look like this perfect 50-50 pie. But I do think you should look at the type of company and the responsibility of the co-founder and then align it to that. There is a really good, we can link it in the comments, data analysis of what most startups are doing that I think can also help people benchmark in negotiations when they're looking at what equity makes sense from both sides.
Yeah. No, I don't know how many times I've seen that where a company will exit and then you'll finally see what the equity split was is on the back end. And the CTO of a tech company has like 5% ownership. And I'm like, it's a little bit outrageous that you would expect someone who is responsible for building the entire product have such a small stake in the company, but it's pretty common. And I don't know where that comes from. If a non-technical founder just doesn't want to give up too much ownership. But from my perspective, it's like you don't have a business without them.
And you
So
said that to the
yeah,
culture of our group. You came to us and you were like, I have this idea. I feel like I can guide a lot of it, but I cannot bring this business to life with my skill set and my skill set alone. That was reflected in how much of the company you were willing to quote unquote give away. And I don't think you saw it as giving away. That didn't feel like the perspective that you had.
No, and one of the tools, if you've never done this before, you might not know that it's an option, but when you are divvying up equity, you can vest those shares. So if you are bringing on a founder that you maybe don't know as well, but you want to properly incentivize them, you can still give them a meaningful stake, but their shares won't vest, like they won't have full ownership in them until certain conditions have been met. And usually that condition is time. So like your shares will vest over 4 years. And once you've been with the company for 4 years, you own 100% of your shares. There are other ways to do it. You can put anything in a contract, but that's one of the tools you have at your disposal if you need to properly incentivize a founder with equity, but you just don't know them as well. And I think when we set up, even though we all knew each other, all of our shares still had a 4-year vest.
Yes, we still put a vest on everything, which I think is the right thing to do. So say you have an idea of the complementary skill sets you want to bring on. You have an idea of the equity you're willing to quote unquote part with, or you're willing to negotiate with to bring on co-founders. How do you go about finding co-founders or founding team members?
I will say this does vary by industry, but for me being in tech, there's quite a few tools at my disposal. So there's dedicated online founder matching, which is sort of like founder dating. Bumble for a while had a business partner matching tool. I don't think they have it anymore, but there's plenty of online things like that. Startup events are a really great place to meet people who are looking to become a co-founder. They might not have a business idea, but they're hoping to find someone working on a business that they find interesting. And, startup events are all over the place. Co-working spaces are another good one. A lot of the space accelerator hubs will have pitch events where people go to just practice a pitch, and they might not have a full business yet. They're just there to get feedback. That's a really great place to meet founders. And what else? When I was at NYU, they had an entrepreneur event where students were pitching their ideas, and it attracted all kinds of people looking for the next Mark Zuckerberg that they could hitch their wagon to. So universities are, I think, another good one, especially if they're a university that really pushes entrepreneurship. More and more, I have seen posts on LinkedIn where people are advertising co-founders as a job opening. And when you go in there, it's like, there's no salary, but I'll give you equity, which is fine. I think that's finding new ways to connect with people, especially now that more people are remote and not doing as many in-person events.
Yeah, and from the perspective of someone who wanted working on a startup to be a part of my professional career, but didn't necessarily have a specific problem that I was crazy about going and solving that I had already identified myself. I think if there are industries that that you're interested in besides just startup events, I think going to industry events are useful because you will meet other people who are experiencing that industry, and you never know what can happen out of networking and conversation. But I think if you say, like me, you're a product manager with experience in a certain arena and you know that you would love to support a startup in that arena, go to as many industry events, maybe not even just startup events, but industry events in that arena can help as well. There's a lot of good tools. And we'll get into how we met, which I think there's a lesson in there as well, which is a lot about if you have an idea, you should talk about it often because you never know who's listening, and we can get into that. So
don't be precious.
Yeah, don't be precious about it. I think a lot of people are. They're very into the stealth mode culture. We did not have that. Was not a thing. And we were just very divorced from the traditional startup model. But I don't know, the idea of not talking about your idea to keep it in stealth is a solid move. How do you get feedback? How do you get perspective? How do you find people that want to build with you?
Right. No, I feel like when defense tech wasn't really a thing, a lot of companies go stealth stealth mode, if they're building some kind of defense technology that they just don't want people to really know about, or they in general don't want a lot of information about it to be public on the internet. But yeah, back in our day when we were doing this, the only stealth mode companies were ones where there was some kind of IP play that they were waiting for. Like they wanted
Right.
to file a patent, or they were trying to get to market quickly to compete with someone else, and it made sense to be in stealth mode. But now I'm like, no, ideas are cheap. You can replicate so many things. And
Right.
anyway, you definitely have to talk about it when you're in the idea phase, which can be very intimidating because that's also when the idea or the concept is the most vulnerable. Like I don't know how many people who like good friends came up to me during this stage and were like, this will never work. I just don't see how this could possibly become a business. And older, wiser now, I realize that had nothing to do with the idea I was pitching, and just that they personally could not imagine leaving a nice, secure 9 to 5 job to go build a piece of technology that doesn't exist and had never existed. It had nothing to do with the idea itself. But sorry, I got us off track.
Oh, you're good. Golden handcuffs are both tight and heavy. I think the last area in this we should talk about before we talk about our founder meet cute is, so you know what the complementary skill sets are. You've agreed that your business needs a co-founder. You've figured out how much equity you're willing to negotiate with. You started to meet people. How do you know that they are the right fit? And I think we should answer this from both angles. So how did you try to assess how members of our founding team were a good fit? And I can talk about what was my perspective as someone who knew they wanted to join a startup. How did I assess that maybe the startup itself was a good fit?
Yeah, I think this is actually very similar to dating. And the way that I assessed things was a value alignment. Because you're bringing in someone who has a complementary skill set, which means like opposite skill sets to you, you're going to have lots of different opinions on things. You want to be able to, like debate well. And because you're likely different on many facets, the through line that I looked for was values. Like, do you value similar things? And that has actually, I think, proven to be a valid method, given that our founding team has stuck around, and the people that have been here from the beginning, we all share very similar values of, like what we're working on is important, but like family comes first. And there's no real debate. Like everyone is very much on the same page of like, if your kid is sick and needs you, like absolutely you can skip stand up and go get them. Like that is not even a question. More from the technology perspective, like technology philosophy, like we all want to work on stuff as well that improves people's life or people's ability to work and create and generally make the planet a better place. None of us are that interested in like running a t-shirt boutique, which I'm not sure how you would encapsulate that as a value, but I think that looking for those kind of commonalities where you're going to be so different would be the thing that I was looking for.
Yeah, I think to provide another example, I think one of the values that you've brought in with all of our hires now to this point is this value of experimentation and the expectation that experimentation is not going to have a 100% success rate. There's no like qualms of just because we tried something that it is supposed to be successful. And in fact, I think you're one of the first ones to ask questions to try and identify as quickly as possible if it is going to fail so that we can kill it faster. So I think that's definitely one. I would say that from the perspective of someone who knew they wanted to join a startup, but was thinking about how do you find the right fit, agree that it's not that dissimilar to dating. There does have to be compatibility in communication and particularly in debates. I don't know if I've told you the story, but I had a boss once who would deliberately find something to disagree with when he was interviewing people for his team because he wanted to see how you would argue in an interview. He did it when I was interviewing for him and he was like, that was intentional. I want to see that you can debate the idea, not the person. And I want to see how you act in a disagreement. And I think there was in our early conversations, I remember a bunch of stuff that we disagreed about, but I never remembered walking away from any of those conversations and feeling that was like such an argument. It was just we were debating, trying to share perspectives and put puzzle pieces together to see what a better fit was. I think that's probably the best advice I would give someone is to pay attention to how they feel after they're interacting with people from the startup they're thinking about joining. And if they have an opportunity through whatever the format is to bring up a contrarian take to something one of the team members is saying, and then just see how the conversation goes after that contrarian take, that part of the conversation went. Was your perspective listened to? Did you feel like you could focus on and learn from theirs? I think that's one of the crucial factors. But That is very reflective, though, of what I wanted in a team. So I think that's somewhere for people to start. But I think people can also think about what have been their most productive and satisfying team experiences. They can identify any patterns in those and then figure out how to find those patterns when they're networking with people in the startup arena.
Yeah, that is definitely something you have to be self-aware of. The whole founding and starting up a business is one big exercise in self-awareness and humility. And I think that kind of comes back to the being able to debate. If your ego is in the game and you're like, that person didn't like my idea, and that means that they don't like me, like you're not going to get very far in general, because so much of, especially when you're building something that is unproven, is you're going to have bad ideas, ideas that are wrong, you're going to fail, you're going to get hit with all of these negative things. And if you feel like that's a reflection on you, you're not, it's going to be a rough time, which is very different to how things are in corporate.
Yeah.
If you're in a corporate job and your project fails, like you might get fired, you might not have a job anymore. So it's completely different. It's in a completely different set of skills and values. But speaking of skills, before we talk about our meet cute, one of the things that I've seen, kind of popping up on LinkedIn is if you even need a co-founder anymore in the age of AI. So can you have an AI or set of AIs as your co-founder instead of a human? And I'm curious to hear your opinion and your take on this. And yeah, if you would recommend it under any circumstance. I have my own philosophy.
I could see certain businesses, but to me, that those are businesses that I would have qualified even pre-AI as businesses that probably didn't need co-founders, that you would just bring on advisors, right? You needed a little bit of marketing support, you go to an agency for project-based work. You need a little bit of accounting support, you hire a freelance. And those are those businesses where I think when you are establishing what scale looks like, can be managed with one leader at the helm. I struggle with that. I think if I can offer as someone who had a co-founder and then also had the experience of running the business without a co-founder while you were on maternity leave, I didn't like it. Obviously, glad you took maternity leave. It was the right thing for you to do. We prepared effectively for me to be able to take over the workload. I hope the team didn't suffer. I think we planned for it really well, and we planned your re-entry too, so that shift wasn't abrupt for either the team members or for you and I. I think I definitely missed the sounding board part of our work. I found myself spending a lot more time thinking on my own and sometimes overthinking or double thinking a decision I had to make or a response I had to make or a way that I had to manage a particular stakeholder, when in normal times I would have thought of what I wanted to do, run my idea past you, injected your feedback into my point of action, and then taken it. So I did feel like I can think of a few scenarios where I think I was a little bit slower to act than maybe I would have been had I had your brain accessible to me. So that's maybe a unique perspective on this, but while I think about that time as like it was the right thing to do, and I'm quite proud of us for being able to do that as a small early stage startup, I preferred it after you came.
I'm glad. That would have been a blow to the ego if I came back and you guys were like, actually, it was better without you here.
It was not. We were fine. We continued to meet our goals and objectives, but we were happier doing it once you were back.
I'm glad, because I was coming back either way. Yeah, I think you're right. That was actually a really good way to sum it up. Businesses that could go without a human co-founder and use AI are probably the same ones that were more of a solo-friendly business model to start with. So like freelance and creator economy businesses where you have like info products, so that's your coaching and online courses and consulting automation tools. If you're a newsletter, content creator, content platform, you're going to go for quite some time before you build a founding team anyway. There are obviously lots of businesses that started out as solo content creators that have built teams and businesses around that. AI has just made that easier.
Maybe what AI does is it lengthens the amount of time and the amount of scale that you can achieve as a solo founder.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you can probably go further now depending on what your product or like prototype or MVP looks like in that bootstrap phase before you need to bring on a co-founder, which could work out really well if you're not 100% sure of what you're building or you don't have a really clear vision of the product and the market that you're going after. It can help you get there while you look for someone who's a good fit. But yeah, the lack of accountability and emotional support if you're a solo founder or you're a solo founder with an AI, an AI doesn't care if you burn out or lose focus, and an AI doesn't have a network that you can tap into to boost your credibility. Your AI is not taking on financial risk, so you're bearing all of the risk yourself, which is another topic we don't have time to get into today, but that is one of the benefits to a founding team, is spreading out the risk a little bit. And obviously AI can't lead either, at least at this stage.
It is May 2025. This may not age well, okay? We know what we don't know.
I think it's realistic for certain cases, and I'm sure as AI gets better going forward, we might be able to expand the types of businesses that an AI could co-found with you.
Speaking of, I think it's time to tell our origin story, and I think you should start it and I can jump in. The idea did start with you.
It did. When I was still in my corporate 9-to-5 job, I had the idea for the company that would become Dauntless. And I had started out just making a pitch deck because I'd done like the entrepreneurial pitch stuff before. So I was comfortable with putting the idea on paper, trying to craft a narrative around it. And I knew that if I was going to raise capital, I was going to need a co-founder, and I was going to need to like talk about this idea and refine it. I built this pitch deck. I don't know that I had shown it to anybody, and I wasn't really clued into or dialed into the Houston startup scene yet. So like now they have all these pitch events you can go to and just like cold pitch an audience. I didn't have that. So I took my pitch deck with me to a girls' night where we were having wine and doing adult coloring, like coloring in pictures, not like coloring each other. And when everyone was like a glass or two of wine in, I like pulled out my printed PowerPoint and was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to pitch this to you. I need to practice. And Sophia was at this ladies' coloring night. I still have pictures from this night.
I love that. So I was new to Houston. I went out and bought an adult coloring book to go to this girls' night because a friend of a friend had invited me and I wanted to meet more people in Houston. And I happened to be sitting right next to you. So I got the full effect of you just pulling a pitch deck out of your purse and plopping it on the table and being like, I want opinions on this. And you just started talking through the pitch deck. Now, granted, there was like a natural pause in the conversation. And this was an entrepreneurial, like lots of conversations about business and work in this environment. We were not talking about, I don't know, it made sense in the context that you brought it up in. And I remember just asking a bunch of questions because the original solution you had proposed was an oil and gas one, and I didn't know a lot about oil and gas, but I was interested in augmented and virtual reality. The conversation eventually moved on. You put away the pitch deck and you were like, yeah, thanks for the like thoughts and ideas. I'm going to keep thinking about this. That's my memory of how it played out.
We met at Agora, which is a coffee shop in Houston, to like go over this in more detail and figure out like what is the actual business behind this idea. We didn't even have a company name or anything at this point because we ended up buying the URL for the original domain when we were at True Food Kitchen, again over brunch, because we have 9-to-5 jobs. So the only time we can work on this is on the weekend. And we didn't have kids or husbands at this point, so we were available for brunch and well rested, which doesn't happen anymore.
What I remember about that day is we agreed to meet for coffee at 9 in the morning, and we ended up eating breakfast and lunch at Agora and didn't split ways until it was like dinner. And I just remember my then boyfriend, now husband, being like, are you good? Are you coming home at some point? I was like, yes, we're just having a great time. And he's like, great, super glad, just like checking in, because I think we literally sat at Agora for 6.5 hours maybe.
Yeah. And I think because we didn't have a technical co-founder at this point, we hadn't incorporated. And I think at this stage, we had decided we wanted to work on this together, but we were still looking for like corporate venture partner not even corporate venture. We were looking for like a corporate partner to build this product because we were convinced that it had to go through one of the customers that would eventually use it. So like one of these oil and gas companies, we were for whatever reason convinced that they were going to be the ones that would partner with us to build it, or we could find someone else already building the product and go work with them or work for them. So we hadn't even committed to forming a business yet, but that's how we met as co-founders. And it was much later on that we bought on a technical co-founder and CTO. There's no one right path to finding your co-founder, but you definitely want to make sure that it's a good fit, because when you form a business together, you literally sign more paperwork when you're forming that corporate entity than you do to get married.
Yep.
Like, there is more paperwork binding us together than there are to our spouses. So choose wisely.
I think we'll call it a day. I would love to hear other people's co-founder stories. These are some of my favorite to hear. So if you have a good one, let us know.
Please let us know. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out our episode about integrating AI into our startup. That'll be right here. And we will see you next time. Bye.